of an attack that happened in 1849 on the Kennedy-Darling trading post. One notice we wanted to let you know about: there will be a raffle at 1 p.m. 2 drawings. Tickets are $1 or 6 for $5. There will also be a silent auction for a 5-drawer toolbox at 1 p.m. on Sunday. If you need more information, go to the Payne Creek Park booth down there at the end where it says infirmary. In case you get sick, there's the infirmary. There she is waving. Okay. Okay, I guess we're all set.
Fancy McCall. Fancy wedding.
On August 14th, 1842, Colonel William Jenkins Worth declared an end to the Second Seminole War. For 7 long years, the Seminole had fought for the right to live in their homeland. But by the end of the war, only a few hundred of these brave and tenacious people remained in Florida. Thousands of their brethren had been forcibly evicted to reservations in what is now Oklahoma. Those few who remained, however, were determined never to leave the place of their birth. It was an uneasy truce. Because the Seminole had fought so hard for so long, they had become one of the most feared tribes in the nation. Leaders such as Osceola and Coacachee had become legendary, and the ferocity of the Seminole warriors had taken on mythic proportions. For those white officials who were attempting to promote the settlement of Florida, the presence of these celebrated warriors proved a significant problem. Settlers would not make their homes in a land where they could not feel safe. Yet conflict with their neighbors was the last thing the Seminole wanted. The long years of warfare had forced them from their comfortable homes in the north of the peninsula and into the inhospitable Everglades. Many whites believed the Indians would starve to death in the harsh conditions of the swamps, but the highly adaptable Seminole had made the wetlands of South Florida their home and were learning to thrive where no one else could. For these people, the best way to avoid being driven from the land they loved was to avoid the whites as much as possible. Total avoidance of the white neighbors would prove impossible. In the rich grasslands near the Peace River and north of Lake Okeechobee, the Seminole grazed their cattle. On those same prairies, white cattlemen fed their own herds, and friction was inevitable. Land speculators with visions of large communities and huge profits wanted to sell off the southern portion of the peninsula to land-hungry settlers. Plantation owners wanted to expand their holdings and spread the institution of slavery deeper into Florida. For all these people, the Seminole were an obstacle that needed to be removed. As much as the Seminole hoped to avoid their white neighbors, they also needed them. The Stone Age Native American culture that had first greeted European settlers had vanished, replaced by one that was dependent upon factory-produced goods. Rifles and steel knives had replaced the bow and arrow. Metal cookpots had replaced ceramic pottery, and clothing was made from factory-woven cloth. For the Seminole Indians, trade with the whites was inescapable. Understanding the reality, the government had authorized the firm of Kennedy and Darling to erect a trading post on the shores of Charlotte Harbor. A hurricane in 1848 destroyed the trading post, and it was decided to build a new one farther inland, closer to the Seminole villages. A small creek that emptied into the Peace River was chosen as the site, and Captain George Payne was put in charge of the store. he hired 21-year-old Dempsey Whidden as an assistant, along with Whidden's brother-in-law, William McCullough, and McCullough's wife, Nancy. With the couple was their 7-month-old daughter, Elizabeth Francis. On the afternoon of July 17, 1849, Seminole leader known as Chipko came to the post, accompanied by several women.
Basket. Many good things. Out here. What do you expect to see? Looking for peaches. Fruit. Nancy, would you attend the ladies' place? Oh. Nice. Good deer hides. They're plentiful in this country. It's thick hide. It's warm at night. Yeah. Okay. Whiskey? No whiskey. No whiskey. Women on. Yes. See, you got some beeswax too. Yeah. Bees, plentiful around here. Careful though. Hurt. Bees. Cooking pots. What do you have pots to do? Come back. Come on. You got whiskey then. No.
After concluding their business, the Indians remained at the store for some time, socializing with Payne and Whidden. In the meantime, William and Nancy McCullough went about the work of preparing the evening meal.
Next time, get Payne. Sir, next time. Yes, sir. I'll come back. Women are honest. Come on now. Come on, women are honest. Women are honest. Yeah. There you go. I'll take you close. Keep your eye on them all the time. Nancy, they came right in the back door and got more stuff. I'll tell you what. Keep your eyes on the stage. They got us again. Okay. You gotta write that off then.
Sometime after the departure of Chipko and the women, several warriors arrived at the store, claiming to have a large number of skins to trade. They tell Payne and Whidden that the skins are on the east side of the river and ask to use Payne's boat to bring them across. Payne responds that he will assist them after supper. They also ask if they can spend the night in the store, but Payne refuses the request. As the merchants enter the cabin for their meal, the warriors appear to be relaxing. What the storekeepers don't know is that this same group of Indians had recently attacked a farm in Fort Pierce and killed the occupant. Concealed from the view of their intended victims, the warriors load their rifles. The Indians burst into the cabin and immediately kill Captain Payne and Dempsey Whidden. William and Nancy McCullough grabbed their baby and flew to the back of the cabin. The warriors fire on the McCulloughs, wounding both William and Nancy. One of the warriors goes off in pursuit. The McCulloughs, both wounded and with the infant in their arms, hide out in the woods and elude the pursuer. After 3 days' arduous journey, they arrive at the safety of a relative's home some 25 miles away from the scene of the attack. News of the murders spread quickly through the thinly settled Florida frontier. Fearing a general Indian uprising, settlers throughout Florida flee their homes and gather at the Army outpost for protection. The government sends in hundreds of troops, and a string of forts is erected across the peninsula. One of those fortifications is erected a half mile from the scene of the killings, and it's called Fort Choclanickla, Seminole for burnt store. Major William Morris and 3 companies of the 4th Artillery Regiment arrive at the site in October of 1849 and immediately begin construction. War appears imminent, yet the Seminoles do not want war. As the fort neared completion on January 19, 1850, Chief Billy Bowlegs came to the fort for a conference. Bowlegs informed the military the murderers were outlaws to the Seminole and had carried out their actions without the knowledge or consent of the tribe. To preserve the peace, he offered to capture the outlaws and turn them over to white authorities. This he does, bringing to Fort Brooke the captured murderers and the severed hand of one that was killed trying to escape. An uneasy peace settles over Florida. No battles ever took place at Fort Choclanicola, and instead of fighting Indians, the soldiers battled boredom and illness. Many of the soldiers succumbed to malaria and yellow fever, prompting the surgeon to recommend the immediate evacuation of Fort Choclanicola. On July 18, 1850, the troops were transferred to Fort Meade. Peace on the frontier does not last, and pressure continues for the Seminole to emigrate to Oklahoma. They adamantly refuse, and in December of 1855, war once again breaks out. For 2.5 years, the Army invades the Seminole homeland, searching for their hidden villages and destroying all they find.
Battle happening over somewhere. That's the second. Yeah. That sounds like a double. Two hot loads of hot doors.
In March of 1858, Billy Bowlegs at last agrees to emigrate, and with him go over 100 of his followers. Yet there are a handful of Seminole that will never surrender. They will remain hidden deep within the Everglades and become the ancestors of the Seminole who live in Florida today. Please remain seated as the reenactors fire a salute to all those who have fallen in defense of the homeland they love.
It just makes me want to caw to him. I want to caw to him.
Okay, win or lose. Shoulder, arm. Boom. Keep your elevation. Shoulder when loaded. Seminoles ready? Soldiers ready? Yes. About face? Right about face. Crazy John! That way. On your commander's orders. Carry on. Soldier. Ready. Aim. Fire. Recover. Arm. Shoulder. Arm. Right about. Face. All clear on your side? All clear over here? John? Not very good. See what alcohol does to you? I misloaded the cat. Fire! All clear over here. We're all clear, folks.